Welcome to another Fraud Watch Friday. I'm Bruce Carlson, and with me, as always, is Kay Tomlinson. Hi, Kay.
Hi, hello, welcome.
And we are going to get into our topic today. And one of the things that we get asked about is I think I might be caught in a scam, or I have a relative who I think is ensnared. And the question is, what do I do next? And it turns out that it can be important what you do right away to either put a stop to the scam effectively, try and get your money back, or at least to report to law enforcement. So Kay has been looking into this, and that's going to be our starting topic today. But as always, we are going to take your questions on any fraud topic. So if you want to go ahead and start putting your questions in the comments, that'd be great. But we're going to kick it off with our discussion topic, which is what do I do now? So, Kay, can you take it away?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. And thanks everybody again for joining us today. I hope you all, regardless of where you are enjoying some sunny weather like we are here in Washington. So, on Fraud Watch Friday, we typically talk about types of fraud, red flags, what to watch out for, how can I protect myself? But we know that fraudsters and cyber criminals are much more sophisticated than we give them credit for. And we know how they know how to expertly get us under the ether into an emotional state that blocks logical thinking, where we can make decisions and take actions that we just normally wouldn't do. Plus, many fraudsters are now using artificial intelligence, makes it even more difficult to determine if something is a fraud or if it's legitimate. Chatbots, voice cloning, using generative AI to make pictures and videos that are so real. Remember that old commercial on TV? Is it live or is it Memorex? That's the point of using artificial intelligence as part of the fraud. The scam might not be new or even that different, but with artificial intelligence, it can be even more believable. So, no matter what steps we take to educate and protect ourselves, we know that nothing is 100% guaranteed. How can we tell if we've been scammed? Or just as important, if we realize we've been victimized, what do we do next? Well, first, how can you tell if you've been scammed or if you're being scammed? Maybe you're getting suspicious of what's going on, or that little voice, is starting to talk to you. You would likely see some unusual transactions on bank accounts or credit cards. Or, you might get a phone call or an email thanking you for opening that new line of credit. You might get some unusual bills and past due notices in the mail or even from a collection agency. You might be locked out of your accounts online if you check your bank or credit card balances online regularly. If a scammer has your logins, you know, typically they're going to access your account and then change the passwords right away. Or if you use cryptocurrency, you might be unable to withdraw money from your crypto investment. Maybe an online romantic acquaintance disappears suddenly, especially if there's been money involved sending to them, either to help them or to invest on your behalf. You might realize that your interactions with the person or the company have had an unusual sense of urgency to act, unusual payment requests if money's been involved. And you might have been asked for personal information that you weren't comfortable about, but you shared it anyway. And now you're having some second thoughts. So, what should you do if you realized that you've been scammed? What's next? Well, there's several steps you can and should take. Immediately cut off communication with the scammers if there's an ongoing interaction. This might seem pretty obvious, but it might also be tougher than you think it is. You might be tempted to keep corresponding with the criminal, hoping that you can persuade them to return some of your money, or that they'll slip up and share some information that's going to help law enforcement catch them. Warning. Scam prevention experts always say that continued communication is unlikely to help, could potentially cost you more money. Your first two calls should be to your bank and your credit card company. If scammers have already gained access to your bank account, the bank can change your account number to deny them further access. Next, you need to change your passwords, all your passwords, on all your accounts. Set up two-factor authentication if you haven't done so already. And of course, take steps to protect your credit. Freeze your credit with all three credit reporting agencies if you haven't done so already: Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. We're going to send you a sheet of how to do that easily after our session today. Get copies of all three of your credit reports from annualcreditreport.com and review them in detail. And don't stop there. Continue to monitor them closely. Don't just check once. You can get a free weekly report now from annualcreditreport.com and really look at them to see if there are errors or any changes. Place a fraud alert on your account with all three of these credit reporting agencies. It forces potential creditors to take some additional steps to verify who's contacting that agency about your credit. Some experts think that this is overkill, but even if you've frozen your credit, this is going to alert the agency of potential fraud if someone tries to get your credit report. I've done this. I think it's worthwhile, something to look at. Of course, document the scam. Exactly what's happened. Gather all your evidence of fraudulent transactions and any communications that you've had with the scammers, any information that might possibly help to identify the criminals. This is especially important because banks are going to likely require this information before they consider a reimbursement. And if you happen to have a separate identity theft insurance policy, they're going to require that as well. Report the scam. File a police report with your local department to document the scam with them. Your bank is likely going to require a police report to consider refunding any money that's been transferred. And if the initial person that you talk with won't take your information, ask for a supervisor or a detective. You should also report the scams to the Federal Trade Commission at reportfraud.ftc.gov. The agency shares information with more than 2,800 law enforcement agencies across the country. Also report to the FBI, ic3.gov. Seems like reporting overkill? The more people in law enforcement that know about this crime, the better. So these are pretty basic steps. You might already be aware of these steps, but what else should you consider doing? Did you pay with a gift card? Contact the company that issued the gift card. Tell them it was used in a scam and ask them to refund your money. Of course, you've kept the gift card itself and the receipt as part of your documentation. Did you give the scammers your social security number?
Ooh.
Go to identitytheft.gov to see what steps you can take, including some good information additionally on how to further monitor your credit. Did they have access to your computer? Update your computer security software. Run a scan and delete anything it identifies as a problem. If you're not sure how to do this, get help from a friend or a family member who's computer savvy, or enlist the help of a commercial business to do this for you. What are some other things to consider? Check your homeowner's insurance policy. When's the last time you've read that full policy in detail? Check it to see if it includes coverage for fraud losses or reimbursements for identity theft related expenses. This, again, is where your documentation is going to be crucial. Consider consulting a tax professional. If you itemize deductions on your personal income tax return, fraud losses might be deductible in the year that the fraud was discovered. But calculating that deduction can be complicated, and certain exclusions do apply. You can get help directly from the IRS, or again, you can talk with a professional because it can be complicated. And if you've withdrawn money from a retirement account to pay the scammers, which we actually hear about quite often, unfortunately, you might owe tax on your fraud loss. Again, a tax professional can help you. You might want to consider consulting a financial counselor or an advisor. Make sure they're a fiduciary, obligated by law to act in your best interest. If you have losses to retirement savings or losses that caused a significant debt due to a loan that you took out to pay the scammers, a professional financial advisor might be able to help you determine your next financial steps. Beware of false credit repair companies that are going to promise to significantly erase your debt if you have incurred a large debt. Do your research before considering this. There are a lot of implications. So groups that we often speak with ask us if there's really a chance to recover any money lost to fraud. And there is a chance for some recovery. It's not hopeless, but you might not be made whole. That's why you should always ask the bank, credit card company, wire transfer company for recovery when you report the fraud. And if you used a money transfer app like Zelle, Venmo, contact them and ask them to reverse the payment. If you sent cryptocurrency, typically that's not reversible. But contact the company that you used to send the money. Tell them it was a fraudulent transaction reported to the police. Ask them to reverse the transaction if possible. You get the idea. Ask everyone and provide your documentation for the fraud. It does not hurt to be the squeaky wheel. But be aware that in many cases, asset recovery companies that say that you can get your money back, they can get it back for you. We'll do all that work. They're going to charge high fees, and many times they do little more than send a demand letter, contact those same agencies to report. Also, scammers might contact you posing as an asset recovery company. They're going to take your money, do nothing. So now you've been scammed a second time. You can do it yourself contacting these groups. Full recovery doesn't always happen, and it may even be rare, but you should always ask, because reporting your loss, documenting that crime are the major things that you can do to increase your chance of recovery. Plus, you're also going to increase the chance that the fraudster can be caught so others aren't victimized. Finally, besides taking all of these steps, you should share your experience with someone you trust, a friend, a family member, clergy. And we understand that this could actually be the hardest part of the whole situation, because many times victims use self-blaming language. I can't believe I fell for this. How could I be so stupid? But you need to understand that it's not your fault. You've been the victim of a sophisticated crime. What's especially hard is if others, including friends or family, are unempathetic and they have a, oh, that would never happen to me reaction. Many people have the illusion of invincibility, the illusion. They'll say, I'd never fall for that. That only happens to old people. The victim should have known better. Of course, none of that is true. I'll say that again. Of course, none of that is true. We all need to realize and understand the scammer's deceptive tactics. And again, with artificial intelligence being used to create not only more scams, but more perfect scams, maybe the question is, can any of us recognize what's real and what's a deep fake, even if it's not part of a scam? So bottom line after all of this, whether we've been scammed ourselves or we have a friend or a family member who's been victimized, this is a crime. It's not a failing. It's a matter for law enforcement, not demeaning. It's a matter for empathy, support, and compassion. Finally, if you have been targeted or victimized by a scam, you're not alone. The AARP fraud helpline, 877-908-3360. Bruce, I know you'll be putting that in the chat. It's free. It's available to anyone. You do not have to be an AARP member or even the victim. Trained fraud specialists, real people, provide support and guidance on not only what to do next, but how to avoid scams in the future. And the AARP Fraud Victim Support Group offers online support sessions online to provide individuals with a forum to meet and then interact with other people that have experienced similar fraud events. You can find links to those groups at aarp.org/FraudWatchNetwork. So we can see just after all of this is a little longer than I usually like to talk at the beginning of our Fraud Watch Friday sessions, but I think this is really important information. We can see how disruptive these scams can be in our lives, recognizing them, dealing with the aftermath, both online and financially, and especially addressing with the emotional toll these crimes exact. Remember, there are resources that can help literally every step of the way, and AARP can help provide some of that information and some of that support. All we have to do is ask. So Bruce, that's my spiel for today. Like I said, it's a little longer than I usually like to talk, but I think that's really important information that we really haven't talked much about in the past. So I'm kind of have taken this opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's great information, Kate. Thank you for doing all the research and getting all the information. A lot of times we say, it's really hard to get your money back if it's gone, but it's true that if you don't jump on it right away, then it's 10 times harder. I mean, a lot of times if it involves a bank or a credit card, perhaps you can stop it before it's too late. But unfortunately, when it is too late, that can be very, very difficult. Once the money's been converted to cryptocurrency or it's gone overseas, then unfortunately, there's not much your bank or law enforcement can do. So, taking those steps right away. And I would say that the fraud helpline is a great resource for that. You can call that number and talk to somebody during business hours across the country who can help put you in touch with advice and resources. So, that's something that we can't offer like to help right away. But, like again, if it involves your bank or credit card, that would be, the place to take action like right now.
Yeah,
Because it is, if you can stop your money in transit or protect your relative from continuing to be victimized. And I would also emphasize the idea that if you are contacted by somebody who has heard about your crime and wants to help you with it, that is a common tactic of scammers. Either they do it themselves or they have sold your information to somebody else who is going to use it to run a different scam. And the idea of selling phone lists and email lists of people who have taken action to participate in a scam is a very valuable piece of information that criminals will pay for. And they go on the theory that people who have taken an action once are more likely to do it again, even if they know that there are scams out there. It's, kind of what their psychology plans tell them. So yeah, so the idea that, law enforcement is contacting you, you need to be really careful that it is really law enforcement, or it's your bank contacting you. You need to be really careful that it is in fact your bank and not somebody posing as that. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So if you have questions about any fraud topic, oh, actually, Jean's got her hand up. Jean, did you want to ask something? Or actually,
Yeah.
maybe educate us.
Well,
I should say that Jean is one of our longtime fraud fighters and knows as much about fraud as anybody, I think. So,
oh,
hi there, Jean.
hi there. Yeah, I know as much. So yeah, hide your emails addresses. No, the one thing I wanted to emphasize, and both Kay and Bruce brought this up, was I've talked with many people who were in fact victims of reload scams, where just what you were saying, Bruce, they would be contacted by someone who pretended to be from law enforcement, who's going to help you get your money back. I'm calling you from the FTC. So the kinds of places where you would have reported, they're now saying, oh, we're following up. We think we've traced your money, but we want to be sure. And they'll ask you to do another transaction so that they can follow that through. And then as soon as that's completed, they'll be able to get you that refund. And so it's really, it's awful because people are so desperate to get that money back. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and we've actually talked with people from the FTC and then insurance investigators that work on fraud, and they all say the same thing. They get thousands of reports every day because people often ask me when I'm speaking with groups, I report and then I don't hear anything back. So why should I bother to report? I had mentioned that the FTC alone shares and compiles their information with over 2,800 law enforcement agencies across the country. They work on compiling, analyzing all of those reports that they get. They share them. They work with other groups, other law enforcement agencies, both nationally and internationally, to try to determine who's perpetrating the crime and how to gather evidence to go after them. So they are working on it. It's just that when they get thousands of reports, they can't hire enough staff to contact everybody individually. And I just saw a little note pop up on the chat, Bruce, how do I know if it's really the police calling me back? I would ask the caller for the name of their department and their badge number, and then tell them you'll call them back, hang up. Call the real police department using a phone number you get from a different source, like a different search engine. Contact them and say, I was just contacted by someone they said that was from your agency. He gave me this name. He gave me this badge number. Is that really a person? Did you really contact me? they're going to say, yes, let me put you in touch with them, or they're going to say, we've never heard of that person, and you know that it was a scam and you just dodged a bullet.
Yeah, I would also follow up on that and say that oftentimes criminals will actually look up the detectives in your police department and use their names
Mhm.
to contact you, but they'll give you a phone number that obviously is not that person's phone number, and they'll say that this is my direct line to my desk, call me here.
Mhm.
And a really good defense is to do as Kay has just said, call the front desk of your police department and sheriff's department, ask for that detective. And it could be that you'll be patched through to the real person who will say, yes, I'm them, but I didn't call you. And then you've avoided, being contacted by a fraudster. But we actually had a story that we profiled of a woman in San Diego who was contacted by the sheriff's department in San Diego, and it was pretty elaborate. The person who contacted her was very convincing that they were a detective for the sheriff's department, and in fact, they weren't. But they just had a lot of information that you can find out online and present yourself as being an actual police officer. So that's like we say, if your bank calls you, if any agency calls you, don't call back the number that they give you. Find the front desk number online, and contact the person that way. And if they are real, you'll be able to talk with them that way. And so we have some questions coming in. That's great. I just wanted to give a shout out to Gene, who does a lot of presentations up in the Island County area, and Andy Meyer is also on today, who's a real expert and does presentations in that area. So I'd like to just put a pitch here. I usually do at the end, but if you're interested in a speaker's presentation for your organization, give us a shout at our speakers bureau, because people like Gene and Andy are very knowledgeable. Kay also does the presentations, and I also want to give out a shout out to Daryl, who contacted us after last month's Fraud Watch Friday and wanted to volunteer with the Fraud Watch Speakers Bureau. So thank you for reaching out, and thank you for joining up. And I hope that's going well for you. And if it's not, let us know and we'll figure it out. But it's my understanding that you've been contacted and being onboarded, etc. So thank you for joining in as a volunteer.
Yep, thanks. And I'm loving your background, Daryl. Just a little sidebar.
Yeah. All right, so we've got a question from Linda, who says that someone keeps sending messages to my contacts. How can I stop this? That's a good question. And she says, had this started after I played one of the games offered on the AARP site? Well, that's not good. We'll have to look into that. And then Karen says, I never answer numbers that are not on my contacts. Yeah, that's fair. So Kay, what would you say about someone who's sending messages in contacts?
Well, if they're getting emails that are supposedly from you, I've gotten messages from my contacts or a couple of friends where potentially your email, and by your email, then your contacts have been hacked. I'd change the password on your email account. I would go into your social media accounts and change the passwords there as well, because apparently someone, whether it's playing games online through the AARP website, as you mentioned, through another website, just accessing social media, or a website that is a fraudulent site but looks oh so real. So you go on that site and then you're kind of hacked. So I would go ahead and change your passwords so that if anybody tries to get into there again, they cannot. And then send a note to your contacts, especially on social media, not to accept like friend requests, that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a note of this, Karen, and see if we can find something out. If it has anything to do with the AARP members section of the website where they have the games, that is definitely concerning. I hope that did not start through there, but if it did, we are definitely going to check into that and make sure it's secure. I mean, it's possible it didn't have anything to do with the website. I will say that. I mean, you don't always know. Um, but we will check into that and we will get back to you next month and see if we can find anything out. Wendy's got a question. I made the error of paying a texted toll bill. And that's something we talked a couple of episodes about, is those toll scam text messages were just rampant there for a while. But she says, I made the error of paying a texted toll bill that I thought was my grandson with my credit card. What should I do now?
Well, contact your credit card of course, contact the credit card company and tell them that it was fraud, and they're likely going to reverse that charge and credit your account. Delete that text and then delete it from your trash as well, because once you send your text to trash, then click the little three dots up at the top, go into trash and empty your trash as well. And then, the thing is that has just become such a popular scam. And I could almost track it from the East Coast to the West Coast across the states, how I kept seeing notices in my fraud feeds into my news lines in terms of being able to see the movement of that scam. And when it hit Washington, it was on the local news, both east and west side of the mountains, and letting people know that the Good to Go folks do not send those texts. But boy, they look so real. And Daryl, I saw your note to, yes, take a screenshot of that text before you delete it. But yeah, go ahead and contact your credit card company. Most likely they're going to give you your money back.
Yeah, that was just, all over the country, those toll scams, here in Washington, it's called the Good to Go. And it purports to be from the Department of Transportation, but there was just a blast. And actually, my wife, my daughter, and I all got texts from different addresses, but with almost the same message, but not exactly the same. But it was the same pitch that you owe tolls, and your car is going to be repossessed, and your driver's license is going to be canceled, and your car registration is going to be canceled. It was very threatening for how little I use a toll bridge. So, obviously they're trying to scare you. And of course, it's always that these bad things are going to happen now, like right away, like your car will be gone when you look out the window. And that's always a sign of a scam too. Law enforcement and the government, as we all know, can sometimes not move very fast. So, the idea that something's going to happen to you within the half hour is often the mark of a scam. So you always have time to check it out. Let's see. Did we answer Susan's questions? Oh yeah, sure. Hi there, Andy.
Hi. Anytime you see any of those messages, they'll point to a website, and every one of the Good to Go, and I have an East Coast number, so it shows what an Easy Pass, all of those things will point to a website that'll say goodtogo.com.something /. If you read carefully what it's pointing to, you'll see right away it's not goodtogo.com, it's goodtogo. It's read from the last /. So it's goodtogo.com some funky site /. If you look at that and you don't see goodtogo.com or easypass.com /, you know it's fraudulent. And that's true of every one of these things. Look at that website and look at it carefully.
Yeah. Actually, I've got one on my phone, and it's and it's from the Department of Motor Vehicles, which would not be the right agency, but it's from an email that is from someone named Amanda Brown and a bunch of numbers at gmail.com.
Mhm.
And like, I guarantee you that, the DOT or DMV does not have a Gmail account that they send things from. I mean, it would be from a more legitimate looking email, but even that's not a guarantee. I mean, sometimes that can be faked, but if you see a, like a Gmail account, a Hotmail account, then you know for sure it's fake.
Mhm.
All right, let's see what we got here. Actually, this is kind of an interesting thing. Carl says, I don't have caller ID, so it's hard not to answer the phone. But I think one thing that we talk about is phone etiquette. A lot of times those of us of a certain age, have been raised with certain phone habits from our childhood, but they don't serve us well in this current age of fraud. Could you talk about that a little bit, Kay?
Mhm. Yeah, very true. We're raised to be nice, and so the idea of answering the phone and then just hanging up on someone if we think it's a robocall is just, I've had people tell me in person they just can't do it. We don't have to be that nice. And I appreciate that you might not have caller ID, and so it's hard to not answer the phone. If you have voicemail, then you know that whoever's calling you that really wants to talk to you legitimately, they're going to leave you a voicemail message and then you can call them back. The thing about caller ID, and maybe it's just as well you don't have it. I don't know. That's for you to decide. The thing about caller ID is it only costs a few bucks to buy a device that can spoof the number and the name on that caller ID. So Bruce can call me and my caller ID can say it's the Lake Tapps Police Department or Pierce County or, the White House, anybody with a number. And the key is you just cannot always believe that. I can tell you, we still have a landline as well as our cell phones, and some of the caller IDs that come through on that landline, cities that I've never heard of on the East Coast that are calling probably about something incredibly important. Of course, we don't answer, and that's the key. You don't need to answer just because somebody is calling you or something is calling you because it's potentially a robocall.
Yeah, I just add on the spoofing technique. As Kay said, that they can put any name that they want. They can put your grandchild's name, they can put the FBI, they can, put any name, but they can also spoof from their phone the actual phone number of the person or entity that they're, trying to fake. We actually had a cybersecurity expert demonstrate this for us, and he put the phone number of the White House, and he had the name the White House, and then a phone number. And if we called that phone number back, it was the right number for the White House. So just because it's coming from the right number doesn't even mean it's real. So it's very sophisticated technology. I'm sort of baffled by how it works, but you just really have to be careful on answering the phone. And just as we say to people, it's your phone. Just because somebody has called you doesn't mean that you owe them anything. I know it feels rude and I know it's hard to just hang up, but you have to think about yourself. If somebody's trying to take advantage of you, you don't owe them politeness. So, I mean, and that's a hard thing to do because we've been conditioned by our parents and the society that we grew up in not to be that way. But it's a different world when it comes to the phone. So actually going back to the phone and Wendy's
And Bruce,
question.
I have one more thought if I can interrupt.
Sure, go ahead.
on that. I actually spoke with a senior lady at one of the events I was speaking at a while back, and she was really beside herself because she knew not to answer the phone when it rang because it might be a robocall, and she just called her friends back if it was a friend calling. But she could not convince her husband to not answer the phone and start talking to people. And so she said, what can I do? What can I do? He doesn't want to hang up. He doesn't want to say no. He just has to answer the phone, and unless I can get to it first. And so
Yeah.
I said, well, create a refusal script for him to have next to your phone. They had a landline. They didn't have cell phones. Create a refusal script with just a sentence or two next, and keep it next to the phone. And that way, make it polite, make it, I'm sorry, I don't take phone calls of this nature. Thank you for calling. Whatever, hang up. Whatever you want to say that makes sense to you, that still suits your sensibilities in terms of not being rude and just not cutting somebody off. It can help. And we've recommended that for some time. I can't tell you how many people actually use it, but it's another option.
Yeah, well, I think it's okay to lie too. I mean, it's okay to say you've got a pot on the stove or you're going out. Sometimes people say, I have to go, that there are police officers at my door. I've got to answer it, or I have my lawyer here. I've got to go talk to him. That'll work. But I would also say, if you want to know who's on the other end of these lines, AARP Washington has on our YouTube channel some videos of people who've worked in these call centers, and there's undercover video footage of these call centers. And if you see the people who are calling you and what their agenda is, you probably won't feel so bad about not taking their calls. That they are very good at appearing to be nice people, sympathetic people, people who are trying to help you, but they are not. So, if you feel like, oh, I can't hang up on that nice young man, I think if you watch those videos, I'll put a link there. But there was Wendy, I think, had a question about banking apps on her phone. Now that she has responded to the text about the tolls, are her is her banking info at risk? Is the information that's on her phone at risk?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly make sure that you have the most recent updates on the apps and that they're set to update automatically for security. I would change your passwords to your banking apps on your phone. Make sure the security updates and version updates on your phone itself are up to date and that they happen automatically. That would be my step. I don't know if deleting the app and reinstalling the app is going to buy you anything. Andy, I know that you're very familiar with the cyber stuff. Anything else to do to ensure that that banking app on the phone is okay?
So now it depends a little bit on whether you're talking Android or Apple.
Yeah, makes
One of
sense.
the things Apple is better at is what's called sandboxing of apps. And that means that no app can easily see anything from any other app, which in some ways is nice because it's secure. In other ways, it's a real pain because you can't take something from one app and give it to another app.
Yep, I've read
Android
about
is a
that.
little bit weaker in there, so it becomes more possible. But really, the main risks are going to be, it's far easier for a malignant site to install malware in the form of things that keep popping up on you than it is for them to leak into another app.
Okay.
If you see malware, if you see anything like that, really your only safe bet is to reformat your phone from ground zero, which
Good.
isn't too bad because both Android and Apple give you a backup, so you can, as long as you know your password, you can wipe your phone and reinstall it. you don't know your password, well, you better go figure it out first. That's sort of a multi-step process. So I'd say probably not, because like the good to go spams are mostly looking for your credit card information, not at putting ads in. But if you are concerned or you see odd behaviors on your phone, I'd recommend a reformat.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I've done the reformat, and all I can say is that it's not fun, but but it does work.
Yeah, yeah, and also as Andy says, if you have a complete backup, then it's a lot easier because it'll just put itself back to where it was. But you have to make sure that that's current, and that's a whole other subject. That's more of a tech subject than a fraud subject. So, but if anybody is interested in that, let us know, and we'll perhaps cover that in a future episode. But also there's a follow-up on changing your email password. But Linda's wondering, in light of your advice, Kate, to change your email password. But that's kind of a good question on changing passwords in general, which is a topic that we talk a lot about. So, Kate, perhaps you could expand on how changing your email password is helpful.
Well, I think that relates back to the question of somebody contacting her contacts, to where her contact list was assumed by someone else, and they're contacting pretending to be her. Another option besides changing the passwords is to just inactivate that password account and set up a new password account. Not a password account, I'm sorry, email account. Inactivate that, set up a new email account, and share that with your contacts so that they know if they're contacted by someone from the old account, not you, contacted from the new account could be you. I know a lot of people have more than one email account. I do. And so that might be an option as well, and not that hard to do, just letting your contacts know.
Yeah, well, that's also a good reminder that if you've been thinking about changing your passwords, it's a good time to do it. I'm saying that for myself. I've got some banking passwords that are old, and I keep saying, well, after my next transaction, I'm going to change it. So there's always an excuse. There's always a reason not to do it. But it's basic cybersecurity is to freshen your passwords. And kind of with password managers and stuff, you can make them more complicated. It doesn't need to be something, it doesn't have to be your cat's name or something like that. So that's just a good reminder. If you've been thinking about changing up your passwords, go ahead and do that. And perhaps I'll convince myself to do it before the day's out. I had a question that came up with me, and I've talked about it with some other people, and I mentioned this to Kay. I was trying to help my daughter file her taxes, and was trying to log into the IRS website, and that raised the question of the secure logins that you can do for the IRS or the Social Security Administration. There are a couple of services. One is login.gov that you can use, or there's one called ID.me that the IRS accepts. And I was a little bit hesitant to use those, so we ended up not going that way. But I was curious because one of our pieces of advice is to keep up on your Social Security web account, just to make sure it's current and isn't owned, a hacker doesn't get a hold of it. So Kate, what can you tell us about those login services?
Those login services used to be SSA.gov. Then it was like myssa.gov. And now it's, what was the first one that you said, Bruce?
It's called ID.me.
Yeah, there's ID.me. And I haven't switched to that. I kind of looked at that whenever you asked me that question the other day. And it's kind of like you can use the .gov sign in, which is great. You can use it for Social Security, obviously. But then the opportunity to go to ID.me, I Say it again, Bruce. I'm sorry.
Well, it's ID.me.
ID.
I'm actually, Linda has got them in the chat.
Yep. And so the key is that's a private company that contracts with the government. That's not a government website. You're not using .gov. Like Andy said, you need to look at these websites and email addresses very, very carefully. It's not a .gov. You're not using a government website that's or ID login to get to your site issued by the government that you're setting up with them. If you do the .me, it's the individual company that's privately owned, contracts with the government. And to be quite honest, I tried to find out some more information about them in terms of we don't know what their security measures are, what their firewall measures are in terms of being hacked. How safe is your access? And how safe is your password with them? I haven't switched to them. I've stayed with the .gov until at some point in time we may be told we have to make that change. That's what I know about it. Is private company. I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like it's supposed to be a convenience to allow you to log in, for all sites across the government. I mean, the IRS and Social Security are the ones that sort of come to mind. I can't think of another one, but I think actually Daryl also mentions that if you were, applying for a government job, I think, actually I've seen that as well. So, I mean, I think it's legitimate, but it sounds like we don't have the definitive answer. So maybe we'll check into that a little bit more. And Daryl and Linda, I appreciate your comments on that because it is important. I mean, who you give your basic info, your most private info to is important to know who they are and what their security measures are, knowing that there are no security measures that are 100%, secure. Some of the biggest and most respected names have suffered data breaches. So,
Right.
You always have to be looking at your accounts and making sure there's nothing suspicious going on. But I'm always, looking for a way to streamline my logins and stuff. So that's why I was asking about that.
Just one quick mention in there. One of the issues anytime you have a private organization is you don't know what they're going to do. They maybe get sold or they may go bankrupt. 23andMe would be an example of a company that has infinite number of people's DNA and they're bankrupt, which means they're going to get sold. And all of the privacy agreements that they had as that company may not hold once they are sold to another company. And that's probably, there's some, I don't know about ID.me, but that's definitely true of a fair number of companies with a lot of individuals' private data. The agreements they had disappear once they are taken over by another company. It's probably the biggest risk of ID.me in my view.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think on top of that too is one of the more popular scams being perpetrated right now is getting an email or a text from a company, a website, a bank saying, we've been hacked. We've had a data breach. Your money's at risk. We want to help protect your money. So you need to transfer your money to this account, this location, this cryptocurrency wallet to keep it safe. And then you can transfer it back once everything is all resolved. Of course, it's a scam. The online April Bulletin article that's out right now includes a story from one of our volunteers, actually, that lives at Panorama down at Lacey, was contacted with this scam just a few months ago and started transferring her funds. She transferred $5,000 and contacted her bank to transfer over $50,000. Luckily, that little voice, she stopped, she called her bank directly and realized this is a scam, and they stopped that transfer. She didn't lose any more money. She lost $5,000. That's not insignificant, but she didn't lose any more money. But boy, is that a popular scam to watch out for now, both in terms of texts and phishing emails. So again, a company that's had a data breach is not going to contact you directly with that kind of information or request.
Yeah, I would say that we've heard of people losing their life savings in these kind of scams where someone, often it's from the government, who says, what you need to do is transfer all your money out of your account into this other account where we're going to hold your money in a safe manner and then transfer it back. So, you can see the flaw in that logic, that once you transfer it out, they're not transferring it back, So if someone asks you to move your money to a new safe location, that is just a huge red flag. Do not ever consider doing that. So yeah, that's just one of those things, along with being rushed and things of that nature. It's just almost always a scam. And I deleted my 23andMe DNA just because I don't need it. It's not very interesting. But it just seemed like this is something to do, that was advised. And as always, a lot of times once your information is out there, you can't really stop it from continuing to be out there, but you can do the best you can to minimize your exposure. And that sort of leads into Shirley's question on how to lock your Social Security number. And I don't know the answer to that one, Kay. Do you know? I know people have issues with trying to protect their Social Security number. So what can you tell us about that?
I did look at that on the Social Security website here 2-3 months ago or so, because I think we had another question about it. And I was curious as to what that entailed. And it looked like there was a couple of different avenues to do that. There's some very detailed information about the steps you can take and the documentation you need to do that. If I remember correctly, I don't know that you could do it on the phone. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly. You might have needed to go down to a Social Security office in person. Go to the Social Security website, see what that tells you. I can tell you that it's not a bad idea to look into it. I saw a story come through, I'm going to say last week, that was from the Social Security, quoted the Social Security Administration saying that by their estimation, about 70% of existing Social Security numbers are on the dark web and in the dark web marketplaces for fraudsters to purchase. Is that true or not? I don't know. That's what they said. I usually tell folks that we should assume that the dark web has all of our information, and that's why we're taking steps to protect ourselves. But again, go to Social Security website, because there is information there about how to lock your number, what that means, how that can help you, and what it takes to do it.
Yeah, actually, Linda says that you can lock it on the ID.me website.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I don't know what locking it means, actually, so I'll have to look into that. I have heard that it's virtually impossible to change your Social Security number, that SSA does not want to change your number. So I think it's only in the most extreme cases is it even possible. So it is important to protect it and protect yourself as much as you can, knowing that the dark web has a lot of your information out there for sale. If you want to see a video on that, there is one with a guy who's a dark web expert who demonstrates for us how you can find information on the dark web, and it's pretty scary. But that's on our YouTube page. I was going to put that in the comments, so I will do that before we wrap up. Let's see. Yeah, actually putting a freeze on your credit is a great idea. We need to do an episode on how to do that. We haven't gotten around to that yet. But it is past 11:30. So if anybody's got any questions they wanted to sneak in, otherwise, Kay, would you like to give us the last word on today's topic?
Well, I think the main thing is that if you think you've been victimized or you absolutely know you have, there's steps that you can take in the aftermath of that. We're going to send you some links, some documents that can give you a lot of the information that we talked about today, and links for at AARP that can help you and share information. I'd like to make sure that everybody realizes that, and in Washington State, and I know we have folks from across the country, I think it's true literally everywhere. Washington State last year and continuing into this year, the number one fraud being reported is imposter fraud. And I think just about all the fraud we've talked about today, imposter fraud. There's a lot of different types. It's not just getting a phishing email or a text or somebody wanting you to transfer money. It's people pretending to be someone else, the number one type of fraud, and the number one means of contacting individuals for fraudulent purposes, at least in Washington, phishing emails. I know we're all getting a ton of texts, but phishing emails still number one. So, as Andy said, look at those websites, look at where the email's coming from, hover over a link to see where you're going to go. All of those things to keep in mind, and don't hesitate to reach out to the AARP hotline if you have any questions at all about fraud, or if a loved one, you're concerned about them being defrauded. Reach out and ask for some help.
Okay, let's see. We got a couple of questions here. Let's see if we can get them in, if that's okay with you, Kay. Let's see. One was, it was about a list of, oh, here it is. Deborah asks, how do I find a list of companies that need a new password? And she says she has had such a list once, but can't find it. I'm not familiar with that. Do you know anything about that?
No, I'm not familiar with that either, but the key is that we always let folks know, change your passwords frequently. Use a password manager if you're comfortable with that, to make sure things are encrypted and your passwords are automatically changed. If you don't use a password manager or another type of passkey to get into your accounts, change your passwords on a regular basis using all of those tactics that we talk about all the time.
Okay, there's one from Andrea or Andrea. I apologize. Hopefully it's one of those two pronunciations. But this is a good question that I think about, and I know other people do. Is there a response to professional offices, doctors, et cetera, or hospitals who say they need your social security number?
I would, no, I always say
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
That's my response. If a doctor's office is still using your social security number as their means of patient identification, like used to happen in the olden days, I remember those days, I always tell them, so why do you need my social security number? I'm not comfortable giving that to you. Is there another form of identification that I can use? I ask them a lot of questions, and they probably get pretty uncomfortable and not very happy that I'm being testy. But I don't give out my social security number. My husband's been in the hospital several times in the last few years. I really don't know if they have his social security number or not, because I don't know that we've ever given it to them. He's certainly gotten service. And, you know, our insurance doesn't seem to care about it either. So I would really push back on that. That's just me. They'd have to give me an extremely good reason as to why they need that. And I
Yeah,
probably still wouldn't believe them.
I think it's just hard because they're aggressive in asking for it. So you have to, kind of like hanging up the phone, you have to, decide how firmly you want to protect yourself. Joy asks, do you have any info regarding the missingmoney.com website?
Yes, I actually had seen a little news report saying, oh, the state has this missing money website that you can check out. And so I went to the website on that news report, and it was an official Washington State.gov website. And I checked into it with our names. And my dad, who's actually been gone a number of years, he had a couple $100 there. And I thought, oh, well, I'll go ahead and apply for that, and I can send that to the charity that he really loved supporting. It was a lot of steps to go through. I just kind of said, to heck with it. My husband his name was there. It was like $40, and you didn't need to give so much information. So I went ahead and filled out the data, and he got a check for his $40 from the state. So go to the website. Make sure you're going to the real website. If you get an email or a text saying, yay, missing money, go to this website, don't do it. Go to your state government offices through a different source to go to the real missing money website. If your state has that, unclaimed funds is what it's called, and then check it out and determine if that's something that you want to pursue or not. Don't go to any of those websites in response to an email or a text.
And note that you're going to the states.gov website, as opposed to even the legitimate ones are suddenly in between you and the state. Presumably, you know which state might owe you money. I've done findmassmoney.gov. That's for that particular state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, there is a unclaimed funds site. I've done that, but I've never gotten any money. All right. Well, I think we're gonna. I think we're gonna call it here. We are 10 minutes over. So thank you to Kay, and thank you to everyone for staying on. I put a link to sign up for the next Fraud Watch Friday in the chat. And if you want to sign up now and register, then you won't have to think about it again until the third Friday of next month. And that link will also be in the follow-up email that you get. So if you want to go ahead and register now for May, we will be back. I know we were talking about a topic, but I can't remember what it was. But just
it's who's fighting fraud for your money.
Right, okay.
We're going to talk about share information about what local law enforcement does when you report a scam. We always say report everywhere. Okay, so then what happens? What do they do?
All right.
Yep. And so local law enforcement, what happens on a national level in law enforcement? And then what do private organizations do to fight fraud? And then what can we do further besides just report to fight fraud? Not just protect ourselves, but what can we do to share the message?
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds good, because that's interesting, because there's a lot of entities that are fighting fraud. We've been over to the Microsoft cyber crime site. It's pretty impressive what they've got going on there. But AARP, we have our Fraud Watch Network site, but also like the postal inspectors are really involved. They've got a lot of tools and a lot of authority, so that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of a lot more than just your local police, but they're involved as well. And then I would also say, well, watch out for the email that is coming. That'll have the link to sign up. that will have the information documents that Kay has referred to. And also it has a survey. And if you fill out the survey, Kay and I will get that information. I know you get surveys from your doctor and Amazon, et cetera. Does anyone read them? Well, in this case, we do, and we use it to try and make this presentation more helpful to you. So if you do take the survey, rest assured that someone will see what you choose and write. And if you'd like a presentation, or if you'd like to volunteer with AARP generally, or with the Fraud Watch Network in particular, I think the best way is to send is an email, and I put the address in the chat, which is arpwa@aarp.org, and that goes to the AARP Washington State office. With that, thank you for the kind compliments in the chat. We definitely appreciate it. So Kay, any last words beyond the last words?
No, and please take a moment to fill out the survey. Ideas for something you'd like to see in the future, and constructive criticism, anything that you would like to add, be kind. But please, we like to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, if it's going to be criticism, at least try and make it constructive.
Well, that's right. This is where
Because,
the
you know,
nice part comes in.
that's right. That's right. All right. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kay. Thank you to all the fraud fighters who've joined the call here. Andy, Jean,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Daryl, welcome to the group.
Yep, Daryl,
And
Jean, thank you.
and we will see you at 10:30. I believe it's May 16th, but it's always the third Friday of the month at 10:30. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. And Andy, I'll be sending you an email today about the speaking engagement we have coming up in another week and a half, 2 weeks or so.
Sounds good.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. Bye.